Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Tracy Show. My name is Tracy. I'm your hostess. Yeah, I think that's the right term. And so I am going to let my guest introduce himself first, but of course, I have a ton of bills to pay. So we're going to get to those. Number one, subscribe. You guys, I'm at 175. This time last year, I was at 139. So that means, and I was stuck there till about December. And I keep growing, keep growing, keep growing. So subscribe to get me to 200. I'm telling you, when we get to 200, I got a special show planned, but I can't do it until I get to 200. So please subscribe to the this channel. If you're not subscribed, you'll see like a little red button somewhere, and it'll say subscribe. Hit it, and you'll also know when I go live. Support me on Patreon. Support starts at just $2 a month, which is 50 cents a week, and it goes all the way up to $15 a month. You can support it. You will get tons of things, such as the announcement coming up here. February 22nd is our first monthly after party. We do this interview on Thursdays. And then after this show, I send all my Patreons a link and we get in the room and discuss pertinent topics such as this month's topic, best food mascot. That is the topic. If you're a Patreon, you will get the link. And please do not email me or comment, I didn't get the link. If you're not a Patreon, become a Patreon by, again, going to this link or going to TRACYMedia The link is there. And shout out to my Patreons, William Russell, Robin Weldon, and Anna Hart. I thank you all for your participation. Let's get to the show, and I'm going to let my guest introduce himself.
Showtime? We're good. All right, my name is Frankie Lozada. I am a Democratic candidate for the presidency of the United States of America, currently on 12 state ballots, gearing up for Super Tuesday. I do want to jump back to Ms. Tracy and say how important it is to support and subscribe, because as many of you watching probably have not heard of me, and that is a problem because a lot of the major mainstream medias are ignoring a lot of candidates who are not named Joe Biden. So for all of our wonderful independent media like Tracy Carson are super important to me and to other candidates out there, both along big races and small races. So definitely support and subscribe. And yeah, so I am the youngest candidate running, and I am in history the first ever Puerto Rican candidate to ever run for the presidency.
Okay, so you know, as a independent leaning voter, I have 1,000 problems with the Democratic Party. I just literally do. It's not personal. Let's just, because I'm going to get to my first question. It's not personal, but I have to know
explain nothing.
Why run as a Democrat? Because we both saw. Well, you're probably way younger than I am. We saw what they did to Bernie the 2 times he ran.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious why run as a Democrat and you know what they're going to do.
So, great question. And it's interesting that you mentioned and brought up Bernie, because when I saw what happened to Bernie, like, I was also in very much denial, because there was a lot of people saying, no, they didn't rig the primaries. They didn't do anything wrong to Bernie. You know, and now that I'm on that end of it, and I can see what they're doing to me and how they're keeping me off certain states and canceling primaries and not covering us, that is very, very real. And I'll be honest, like, I'm starting to feel the same sentiment of why did I join this party? But the reality is that for me to run as an independent would have been political suicide. It's wildly more cost effective than it's already costing me now. You have RFK Jr., who's running on the independent line, who has $15 million in his bankroll, and still with the Kennedy last name is having trouble getting ballot access. So for someone who has no name, has no big funding, that would make it even more difficult. Can't run as a Republican because the Republican candidates have to pay astronomical amounts for ballot access. I think the average amount you pay for ballot access in certain states that you could buy into is like $50,000 for Republican Party, and $25,000 for some states if you agree to go to their state convention. So perfect example, it's $50,000 for Republican in Colorado, where it's $500 for
Wait a minute. I'm
a
sorry to
Democrat to go in.
interrupt. Do you mean 50,000 per state, or you mean 50,000 overall?
So not
yeah,
per
I
state.
thought
Some
that's
states
where you.
yeah. Well, some states. So that's the thing is per state, depending if it's a buy-in state. There's certain states that you could buy in to pay to play. There's certain states that will recognize you based on your status, whether you're a recognized candidate, you're advocated on media, or people know who you are. And there's other states where you have to do the hard work and groundwork and get the petition signatures to be placed on the ballot, like in states like Illinois, New York, and etc. So, but a lot of the states are, I think there's about 17 or 18 states that you can buy into. At least on the Democratic side, there might be more on the Republican side, but majority of those states are $50,000 per state for the Republicans.
50. Okay. And everybody who's watching this show, you all are used to me interviewing a third party candidate. Please don't go in the comments, why are you interviewing a Democrat? The Democrats are corrupt. Trust me, we're going to talk about the corruption of the Democratic Party because I'm pretty sure Frankie's going to agree with my assessment. So just know we're taking a little bit of a detour, but I think his values line up with mine. We just come at it from two different points. So just keep that in mind. I will still continue to interview third party candidates. Nothing's going to change. But I've been trying to get Frankie on this show for, oh my goodness, such a long time. I'm like, hey, I got this Thursday open. Can you come? My second question, again, yeah, this is something I'm going to say. I don't have a problem with Joe Biden's age. Mm-hmm. I know everybody says, oh, he's too old. And I'm like, no, because, I know a lot of senior citizens in their 80s and even their 90s. They're sharp. They're they have cognitive. They don't have any cognitive issues. Joe Biden is not that person.
Yeah.
And I wonder, what do you think about the media, such as my least favorite talk show, The View, saying, we have to elect Joe Biden, when Joe Biden himself said there's 50 Democrats that could beat Trump. I'm like, okay, well, why did you run then? And remember, everybody, he also said he wasn't going to run for a second term. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but talk about that.
Well, I agree with you too. I don't believe age is that much of an indicator as far as cognitive skills are. Way back when I was a volunteer EMT for 5 years, I remember one patient specifically, and I thought that she was having an altered mental status incident because when I was asking her age and her date of birth, the calculation would have made her 101, and this lady was full on focused, having a great conversation with me, and I'm like, wow, man, what's going on with her? Checked her ID, and sure enough, she was 101. And it was the first person I'd ever met over 100. And I was amazed because at that time, my grandmother was in her 70s and my grandmother was dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's. So there is no real correlation as far as age and your cognitive abilities. I'll give you that. I agree with you in the sense that Joe Biden is not that person. However, I do think that given how rapidly technology is going and times are really changing, I think it is super important to start having younger perspectives and people who are now living with the times to kind of go and be those legislators and people making those changes and decisions. I think that's really as far as Joe Biden.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. You go right ahead. No, I said even himself, he said, hey, I'm going to pass the torch. I mean, he literally used that phrase. I'm like, okay, why didn't you pass it then?
It's rough times. He's going through, I don't know what he thinks he has to prove. One of the things I will tell you is that that propaganda is hindering my performance as a candidate, and it's hindering the party's acceptance of me. So among old school Democrats, they do not like me. I am, the devil in the flesh for trying to run against our own incumbent president. But you know what? I'm legitimately concerned because I see the numbers. I'm a realist, and I see that every single day people are jumping ship and leaving the Democratic Party. South Carolina only had 4% primary turnout. We're used to having 10 to 15%. If those aren't red flags that we are focusing on and accepting, then we're only damaging ourselves. And I'll be honest, Joe Biden cannot win and beat Donald Trump. The mindset that you're going to sit there and think that just because he did it before, that he's going to do it again. You know how many times World Series baseball teams has faced the same challenger in consecutive years and lost? We can't get into that mindset. He's not going to win. We're saying it. They're saying it. And in reality, Americans don't want either candidate. They're just as upset at the fact that we have this, but the media holds on to sit there and say that these are our only options and we have no other candidates.
I'm curious about when you say you're a Democrat and you're out, because I thought I saw your numbers in New Hampshire and I thought, he did as well as I thought you could have. I thought, it was way better than what I expected because, like I said, Biden had a whole bunch of help as a write-in candidate in a state that he said he didn't want to be in the ballot on, but that's okay. Too, I thought, well, he's placing well. When you talk, assuming that you went to New Hampshire, assuming that you went to South Carolina, like what are people on the ground saying? Not the political elites and the vote blues, no matter who's. I'm talking about the average person. What are they saying to you?
So in everyday conversation, there's never been a single person that's told me that we have to elect Joe Biden. There's not a single person that sits there and says, I want this person. The only people who I've come in contact with are the Democratic parties within the states, the ones that are already established and have their rituals and traditions. And they're the ones that are sitting there telling me, you're wrong. We have to support our incumbent, no. And that was with New Hampshire. I did campaign a little bit in New Hampshire, not as much as I wanted to, but I was there during the primary week. And I'm glad I did because I got some media attention and I got to be face to face with those voters. And it's crazy because they did that write-in campaign, and I went to the polling stations, certain ones that I were high up on the ballot because they drew out the candidates' names. So in polling sites where I was either first or reasonably high on the ballot, I would go there, introduce myself to voters. And they had people out there with their signs, write in Joe Biden, write in Joe Biden. And when I would talk to them, almost all of them were not even from New Hampshire. They drove in from Massachusetts to volunteer for those campaigns, to sit there out there in the cold and hold up those signs. And it's tough to see because the people who were coming up there and yelling at the people with the signs saying we shouldn't write him in, he should have been here, which honestly, I agree with them because I was astonished about how important that first primary was to New Hampshire residents.
It's in their Constitution.
It is, but it's not even just the fact that it's a law. It's about how embedded the people are. Like, it was so cool. Like, every candidate, no matter what your status is like a local celebrity there. They take pictures with you. Everybody's interviewing you. They have diners there where Donald Trump's walking in and out, Nikki Haley, all the candidates were Marianne Williams and Dean Phillips. Everybody was just out in the streets running a ruckus. And it was such a beautiful thing to see so many people civically involved. And the fact that I experienced this for the first time, and Joe Biden and the DNC understood and knew that how important this was to New Hampshire residents, and then they still decided to pull that nonsense is ridiculous.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I'm just like, I'm more upset that I think it was 70,000 people got up out of their bed to physically write in. He has historically done terrible in the primary, which is why the DNC didn't want to put him up there on the first primary. And it would break my heart if I were a New Hampshire resident to have to wake up and sit there saying, we've told you time and time and time and again, we don't like this guy. And now you're forcing me, or at least convincing me, to have to write his name in.
Yeah, there's a whole big controversy around that because people were coming out saying they didn't vote for him. Like, how did he get all those votes? And then you realize big money interests are behind it. So, gee, what a shock. Big money interest in America. I do not. I'm so shocked. I mean, next thing you're going to tell me is that the Democrats fix primaries. I mean, come on. But I want to talk about South Carolina.
They are. I am going to tell you.
Yeah, I want to talk about South Carolina because you brought up a great point. The Democrat, I know you're a Democrat. I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but the Democrats are not going to win South Carolina in the general. It's not going to happen. You're not going to win South Carolina, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio. Like there's states, like the Republicans aren't going to win California, New York, Washington, Oregon. There's states you know you're not going to win. Why do you think that Biden wanted to move that to make South Carolina first? It doesn't make sense. I'm like, you're not winning this in the general. Just let New Hampshire be first.
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. So, especially in a primary season, the last thing you want to do, because it's running on the party, it's taboo to have challengers to the incumbent. But the last thing you want to do, especially when you have challengers, is to show that your main candidate, your incumbent, is showing any signs of weakness. So now, for example, with New Hampshire, like I said, historically, Joe Biden has done terrible in the primaries in New Hampshire. In fact, last time he came in 5th. And so they didn't want to have him come in 5th when he's the incumbent. So what they did was during the 2020 election, Joe Biden was losing certain primaries, and then South Carolina, I don't know what his marketing and campaign team did, but he reached out and connected with all the black voters of South Carolina, and that was his most successful state in that primary, and it propelled the rest of his campaign forward.
And you're forgetting that.
And so to play.
Oh, shut up.
Okay.
I'm going to shut up.
Well, there you go.
I'm going to shut up. Nope. No,
but I already know what she was going to say.
I'm like, no. Because I'm like, wait a minute. In 2020, the worst that the two top leaders, Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders, the worst Pete Buttigieg was second place. That was the worst he ever ranked. How do you get out of the race if you're first or second to and then endorse the 5th place person? Really?
Because it comes down to delegates. So New Hampshire doesn't have as many delegates as South Carolina. So that's why they also moved it first. Because if you noticed, they took away. I've been saying that since the whole decision to move the primaries around, I said it specifically. I said, watch. I promise you that if Joe Biden doesn't win the New Hampshire primary, they're not going to count the delegates. And so thankfully before they said, look, we don't approve of this primary. Your delegates don't mean a single thing. Your election is irrelevant. Is basically what they said. Now Joe Biden won it, and now all of a sudden they're like, let's talk about it. Maybe we can make these delegates work. And I was like, okay, called it. But South Carolina, for a candidate like myself, if I'm running in the primary, if I lose South Carolina, I'm starting at a heavy disadvantage with how many delegates he gets from such a big state. So it's a numbers game. It's basically like if you're trying to gain fans. So he has this many fans, and he's already that much closer to getting to the number that he needs to win. So it's a discouraging factor and intended to disqualify other candidates. Like Marianne Williamson already dropped out. When I was speaking to her in New Hampshire, she was already kind of hesitant and discouraged, and you thought she was going to drop out then, but she really focused and dedicated her work on Nevada, and unfortunately the results weren't what she expected, and it wasn't satisfying the cost requirement that she was really dishing out, so she dropped out. And I would,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would be surprised if, Dean Phillips says he's in for the long run. I would be surprised if he stays in past Super Tuesday, because Super Tuesday is a pretty big indicator of what's going to happen in the primary nomination.
And here's the thing that I don't think you Democrats realize. First of all, I don't know who says the incumbent can't have challengers. If I'm the incumbent, let's just say I'm president, and you say you're going to challenge me. Okay, let's debate. Let's set this up. I'll debate you in the park, in the air, no, anywhere. Wherever you stay, I'm there. That's the first thing I'm going to do. If I have achievements and I have things that I've done, you stand no chance against me. So
I
sure,
agree with you.
I'm going to let all the challengers go.
I
But
agree, 1000%. And
go ahead.
I listen. I'm in favor. I believe iron sharpens iron. So if you are the most qualified candidate, earn it. Be that person. I'm the person that on my campaign trail I preach that I don't want to see a single race nationwide. That's my dream, to never see a single person get a free ride into the next term. I want to see every single race contested in the primaries and in the general. That's how we
Absolutely.
maintain accountability. That's how we do it. We show what you're doing and what you want. If we keep allowing the gentleman I ran against Congress, Gregory Meeks, has been there for 25 years, probably not 26 years. And most of my signatures came from people giving me a hard time saying, I don't know who you are. I don't want to sign your petition. And I'm like, okay, tell you what, if you can't name me your congressman, you got to sign. And immediately they're like, give me that. Because they didn't know. Man was there for 25 years and they didn't even know his name.
But that
Because
what
he
I'm
goes
getting.
in uncontested.
Yeah, he goes uncontested, and that's going to lower. Which as a third party voter, I'm like, yes, lower that voter turnout, lower it, because that makes it better for my candidate. But that turns people off, right? Because if you're going to get in and you won't debate, if you win the nomination, basically, it's like they don't think that people are smart enough to figure out, oh, well, he didn't even debate. If he can't debate you, Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, Cenk Uygur, even though I'm like, dude, why you running? You're not from this country. You can't run.
Don't
But we
get me
go just
started on him.
we gonna just we gonna just delete that and not go there. But he's not even made a ballot yet. Like, really, you're not going to. But
yeah, and he's
it doesn't.
misleading voters too. But
Yeah. Oh, see, we're on the same page. I said we're going to be on the same page a lot of things. But what I don't understand is how does the Democratic Party, especially for those down ballot seats, because Joe Biden is going to be at the top if he wins the nomination, or if he's the nominee, he's going to be at the top. How likely are people, if people don't vote for him, they're not going to vote for the other Democrats on the ballot. So how do they think they're going to win with that type of done? I don't know if my question is making sense, because I'm like, how are you going to win with doing that? Because people aren't going to vote for you if you're doing that. People are not stupid.
Well, you're right. And as I mentioned before, the number that they're ignoring is how many people are leaving the Democratic Party every day. Now, remember, the average voter is not in full understanding of how independent candidates really run. They're traditionally focused on voting for their party. And so if they're showing a disgust for Democrats, in their mind, they're just like, I'm never voting Democrat. So you're right, on the down ballot, that means, yeah. So here you have this person that we're putting up on a pedestal, and we're saying that everything he stands for is representative of our party, which is absolutely not true. And honestly, as somebody who's running on the Democratic line, I'm just as upset and frustrated. Like, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's 4 states that completely canceled the primary. They refused to put on anybody
Florida,
else.
North Carolina,
Tennessee, and then Massachusetts tried, but then the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Commonwealth actually put on Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, completely ignoring other candidates, which I have a problem with too. But the biggest one that hurts me the most and just aggravates me is North Carolina and Florida. But North Carolina, because Anderson, specifically because of Anderson Clayton, she is the youngest state party chair for the Democratic Party ever. And she's supposed to be the voice of progressives and the youth and bringing people together and activating and triggering the youth of this nation to be the future leaders of this country. And then she cancels the primary and doesn't allow anybody else on and falls into play with all those old school dirty politics. Come on. And then me as a Puerto Rican candidate, Florida canceled their primary And I'm now have no access to the largest Puerto Rican population off of the mainland for no reason.
And you can't do write-ins. Yeah, and for primaries, most people don't know. You can't do write-ins in primaries. Right. You can do it for the Florida, general, but Florida you can't. But I know in Indiana you cannot. You cannot do write-in primaries in Indiana. That it's like who's ever on that ballot. Of course, our state doesn't allow third parties to have primaries, which I think is a bunch of crap. But okay, whatever. But yeah, in most states, you can't just write in somebody in primary. You can in the general, but not the primary. So I wonder. Here's something I wonder: has somebody from the Democratic Party approached you and said, maybe this may be too personal, so if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. Has approached you and said, maybe we like your ideas, but now is not the time.
No, actually, I never get past that part. Like when I called up Pennsylvania to figure out all my information, I got yelled at by the actual party. Hung up on, I got blamed. She was like, I'm going to save your number if Donald Trump wins because of your nonsense. And then click, hung up on me. And I'm like, okay, this is the party that I'm supposed to be representing. I had to drop off all of my paperwork to the state of Pennsylvania chairs. Still have no response from them. I left it right on their desk. I went to the Secretary of State to make sure they stamped all my stuff because there was zero response time. So the parties have not been talking to us at all.
See, I not even they would have given you a phone call and said, we really, Joe is he's the step. No, they won't say steps. They'll say, he's been in it longer than you. You got to work it. You got to wait your turn. I literally thought they would do that, but you're saying they're not even letting you get off of the. I wish somebody would hang up on me. Oh,
yeah, but that's what's happening. Perfect example: New Jersey, which is the next state that I'm seeking ballot access on. There, we had a deadline by January 8th. I spent months communicating, nothing. Finally, I found an email. Boom, sent it in. I got a response back on January 8th. January 9th came, the day after the deadline. I got a call from the Jersey Democrats. Say, hey, we saw some missed calls here. We just wanted to make sure we touch base. And I'm like, wow. The day after the deadline? Come on. At least wait a week after and play it off. But that's what the barriers that we've been kind of dealing with. And it's upsetting because it's taking, campaigns are expensive. And it's a lot of work. It's tiring. And when you're sitting there making unfair, like low key, like I'm thinking of with my legal team on all the states that didn't allow proper candidate ballot access, I'm thinking of even taking a lawsuit and suing them for my campaign finances. Because they're taking that opportunity away from me. It's not giving me as a fair chance, and I had zero reason to be excluded from those ballots.
Yeah, you're an American citizen, and yes, people out there, Puerto Rico is considered a part of the United States, not a state, but it's a territory. So you can't, unlike certain people who were born in Turkey, Frankie could actually run for president.
Well, I was born technically in New York anyway. My mother was born in Puerto Rico.
I know, but I'm just saying, he was like, what are you Puerto? I know that. See, I knew that, but I'm just saying, but you live in Puerto Rico, right?
Well, no,
I live in New York.
I live in New York, but
yeah, that's right. But you're Puerto Rican.
It's interesting the dynamic of how, because I'm glad you said that, because there's a lack of awareness as to what the status is for a lot of Americans, which is concerning because I'm pretty sure this should be in your history classes. But here's where it doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, I have the right, because I'm a New York native and a New York resident, I have the right to vote in my local elections and for the president. If tomorrow I decided I want to move to Puerto Rico permanent full time, I lose my right to vote.
But Puerto Rico votes for the president, but not Congress.
They do not vote in any federal election. They have no Congress representation. They cannot vote for the president.
Now I'm sitting here thinking Puerto Rico could vote for the president.
In fact, one of the bills that I'm proposing is called the Save Democracy Act, SAVE, which is the Secondary American Voter Expansion, which would give Puerto Rico and all of the territories that the United States is a part of the right to vote, at least for federal instances and for the president. And that bill also includes the 750,000 residents of Washington, D.C., who also live on the mainland and cannot vote for the president of the United States. So that bill would encompass about 4.3, 4.4 million people.
I'm today years old because I literally thought that people from Puerto Rico, I'm like, oh yeah, them, DC, Guam, New Guinea, da 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 da. Well, you'll see, Tracy, you're learning something. Um, but back on my other question, I literally thought that you would have got some call, not from Biden himself. Well, I never would expect that to come.
In fact, I won't reveal too much, but instead of getting calls, I've been reached out by certain teams of independent candidates who like my platform, who like my presence, who believe in my vision, and they've been asking me to join their cause.
That would make sense because your policies, which we will talk about here in a moment, they more or less line up with what I believe, right? Because the Democratic Party, yeah, it's like yeah, it's just I didn't mean to keep interrupting you, but like when I heard Joe Biden say, "Oh, if Medicare for all gets to my desk, I'll veto it." Okay, yeah, it's a 60 minutes. He literally said on a 60 minutes interview, right in the 2020 campaign, this time where he got elected, like in October, something like that. And he said, if Medicare for all gets to my desk, I will veto it. And people went to vote for him. That's my number one issue. Medicare for all is my number one. If you're not for it, I won't vote for you. I don't care. You can. I mean, now genocide in Israel is taking precedence over that, and we're going to definitely talk about that too. But yeah, I'm just like, okay, wait a minute. Let me think about this. It wasn't much to think about. Oh, you must be reading the question that Mac has.
I was trying.
And I don't get to the questions. I used to just display them as they come in. I wait to certain points of the time of the show, but I will get to them. And everybody, put your questions in the comments. And I have fire trucks running because I live down the street from a fire station. So you may hear trucks going in the background, which I don't know why I chose this house because I love it. But yeah, it's down the street. It comes. That's the one thing I don't like. But I wonder, like when you talk about taking legal action, I'll pledge this: if you do it and you get yourself some type of donation link, send that to me because somebody's got to do something about these two parties. They both are stupid. They're both corrupt. They both keep. I mean, the same thing that happened to you happened to Sam Rowan, who's running as a Republican. Like you guys have like almost identical stories about how party leadership says, okay, this is our nominee, and don't let the people, the actual voter decide who they want. It's one thing if the voters say, hey, we want Joe Biden. They're not saying that, but okay. But it's one thing if they say it and nobody interferes. It's another thing when the party says, no, this is who you're going to pick. It's either this person or nobody. I don't know how they plan on communicating this message to regular Americans. How are you going to tell regular Americans, oh, we have democracy and no debates? That's my question. What happened to your party in not having debates? This is the stupidest move I have ever heard. I'm like, this would have been great. I think I know why, but I want you to talk about it.
I would walk circles. I'll say it right now. Walk circles in a debate against Joe Biden, Cenk Uygur. Dean Phillips is a great speaker. He has a lot of great policies. The only issue I have with him is that he doesn't understand the average American struggle. He's basically running a campaign saying, I never lived it, but I get it. And I'm like, nah, homie, that's not how it works. You have to live it. You have to breathe it to understand how to fix it. You cannot fix what you do not understand. So I appreciate, and have a lot of love for him taking the campaign trail and trying to make a difference. cool, but don't run on that platform. But I would. That's the reason why they don't have those debates, is because we would tackle a lot of the topics. But to your point about, people having to sit there and be told to vote for him, this is going to be a scary election, because now the DNC is waking up, because they're realizing they're pushing this candidate and people are not supporting him at all. And it's showing, because now they're bringing legal action against RFK Jr.'s team for his ballot access efforts, because they don't want him to be on it. There is a good chance that this election will go to Congress, and they are not happy with it, or will go to the states, quote unquote.
Yeah, and that's and that you just hear this whole thing about, oh well, we want to protect democracy. Really? This is how you protect democracy. Let people vote for who they want to vote for. Don't interfere. Let everybody that wants to run for president be on the ballots. Have everybody accessible to the debates. That people have choices. Yes, people can handle choices. They go into the grocery store all the time, and any item they buy, there's at least 100 of those like items. There's 100 brands for each item in the grocery store. They can make choices. But I want to talk, like I said, if you decide with you and your campaign team to get fund a lawsuit, oh, please tell me about it. I will definitely contribute, because I just think the way that they're operating is just so out of pocket. So at this point, I do want to go to the comments, because we have Mac who's commented. Hello, Mac. He wants to know, what is your background in elective office or appointed office?
So I love this question so much, because I get it all the time, and I get judged by it. It was even in Congress when I did. So I have never held office. I ran for Congress. I was never appointed into any office either. But here's the difference: is what I had done in my community is I've been a lifelong activist, mostly for social justice, social equity. So I work a lot with New York legislators, which is my home state, and I write bills. I write bills that they'll accept. We'll try to introduce them, try to get them passed. We have had some pass after being ripped apart, and we've had some successes there. But I love that question, because when you think about what your experience is, everybody thinks that is a requirement and a necessity for office, which having an understanding of policy, yes, absolutely. But this presidential election is a perfect example, because we had the last president who had zero experience, and half the country thinks he is the greatest president in the world. Then we have the president now who has all the experience in the world, and well, look where experience got us. So there has to be a balance. You can't sit there. If having experience means that I know how to rig the system, I know how to lie to voters, and I know how to take all this corporate, corrupt money, I don't want experience. Sorry. I want to sit there and make laws. And the fact that you would invest in me as a candidate means a lot, because remember, I'm part of the 99% of America, which means that any laws and things that I fight for impact my life directly. So I am specially vested into passing those things, including one being Medicare for all, or having access to healthcare.
Next comment. Wait a minute. President Joe Biden said that he wouldn't run for re-election. He certainly did. I didn't know about that statement. He absolutely said it. As a matter of fact, he said, I'm going to pass it. I'm going to get in this one term to get rid of Trump, and then I'm going to pass it along. Everybody just forgets that, but absolutely. Last comment. I read your answers to the questionnaire from www Ballotpedia, and your areas of personal passion are good for including the environment. But what do you think about the science community and the potential for a science revolution within this generation, when the level of the interdisciplinary cooperation is at an all-time low? I'm worried.
That is a great question. We absolutely need a science revolution. As I mentioned before, one of the concerns I have with some of our older candidates is they're not keeping up with the times. And so we're staying in old rustic ways when we should be advancing just as quick as everything else. We're only selling ourselves short. We don't accept those changes coming forward. Now, in reality, can we expect everyone else to jump on board? No, we can't control other nations. We can't control. I know we have some cooperations between NATO and the United Nations and all these different coalitions as far as for environmental, but none of them are really doing the work. And so what we have to do is we have to lead by example and show them that, hey, we believe in this, in the science behind everything. Is we're going to start this revolution without y'all. If y'all want to jump on in, let's do it. Look at Japan. Japan started their technology revolution, and look how far ahead they are in almost every aspect of technology. So it comes down to, we as America are one of the most watched nations in this world. We should be leading in that way, in positive manner, in innovation, and showing everyone that we are the greatest nation in the world that we claim to be.
Yep. So now we're going to talk about your campaign.
Let's do it.
Because I'm sure that you don't want to just talk about how terrible Tracy thinks the Democratic Party is, because I think they're terrible. But I want to talk about your campaign in terms of your campaign philosophy, and those type of things. So my first question is, and you pretty much answered it, but I always ask candidates who run for president, why run for president of the United States?
Well, I think it's super important. I am a Latino candidate. I am the first Puerto Rican candidate. I did not know that until I got interviewed for the first time, and somebody brought that to my attention, and it blew my mind. It really did. Because Puerto Rico has been a colony for 125 plus years, and nobody, not a single person, has ever tried to run. In fact, if you break down the numbers, I'm only the 5th Latino to ever run, and I'm the 2nd one on the Democratic line in all of these years. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense, because Latinos are such a prominent people in this country. In fact, we're the biggest spenders. We contribute to, I think, $3.5 trillion per year come out of Latino pockets. And yet we have such low historic voter turnout percentages. And that's disheartening, because, we become so complacent in where we are in society. And I noticed that one of the biggest things is we've lost hope, and we've become discouraged, and there's no faith in the system. And I thought it was because I don't see anybody who's fighting for the things that I want to fight for, specifically because I don't see anybody that looks like me or sounds like me. And I see the wonderful potential in all of the American people of all different colors and races. And I see the potential within my people too. And I'm like, we should be able to be there. Not only should we be in the room, but we should have a seat at the table and be able to share that stage. And so that's why I decided to run, because you know what? I'm hoping to inspire those, and for them to see somebody say, hey, wait, we could do that. That was an option for us all the time. Absolutely. And in fact, I want to see someone. And if anybody watching wants to run, if you have any questions about running, I understand it's a very intimidating process, and we do want to fight those changes. And there's so many unknowns. I'm willing to answer all those questions. Reach out to us, check out our website, reach out to my campaign team. I want to see more people run, and we will work as diligent as we can. As long as your mission is clear and you are a good-hearted person, we will help you get to where you want to be.
Thank you for answering that question. You have given the most concise answer. Trust me, I've heard some I'm like, you're running for what? So thank you for that. Of course, I have to talk about issues that are pressing our nation. And the number one, the elephant in the room, is the situation in Gaza.
Yep.
And I said I wasn't going to mention Biden, but there was a round of funding that Biden went around Congress to give Israel more money to basically commit genocide, in my opinion. The American people clearly want a ceasefire. In every poll, we all want ceasefires. What a ceasefire. What do you think is the best option? What would you do as president to solve that issue?
Well, for starters, I would never have let it get this far. I am not a military strategist. I'm not a war general. I don't have any military experience. But I do know that Israel's approach to how they're um, approaching this war is evil, absolutely evil. It is what it is. We need to start calling it. And we as Americans, that's not a single strategy we would have done. Otherwise, we wouldn't have spent 20 years in Afghanistan. That war would have been over in a year. Let's be real. But we have and understand the need for humane approaches and tactical approaches. And just, I'm sorry, but bombing an entire population is not the way to do it. And so we would need somebody to sit there and hold our own allies accountable. I'm not saying don't defend our allies. Don't get me wrong. I understand our dedication to protect them. But at the same time, we need to be able to be on the same page. And if we're funding it, you best believe I'm going to know where my money's going. And number two, I'm going to sit there and say, no, 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 we're not doing this way. I'm running the show. If you want to do your own thing, great. I'm taking me and my money and I'm going out. You guys handle it. And that's not what's happening. What's happening is,
yeah, right.
Good.
Yeah, what's happening is it's like, well, Israel has a right to defend itself.
And they do. But
and
this
they
is
do,
not defense.
But yeah, this killing 9,000 children who are not Hamas. Palestine and Hamas are two different things. They're two sets of different people. And somehow our media and our leaders on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, are, well, if you're for a ceasefire, you must support Hamas. I don't. I'm not sure where that, and that's why I'm trying to come up with the right word because I can't cuss on my own platform when I said no cussing. But the word I'm thinking, it's a bunch of malarkey. There it is.
There you go. There you go.
I'm like, huh? Of course, Hamas is a terrorist organization. They're clearly terrorists, no doubt about it. But it's the 9,000 children that I think hits me the hardest.
Oh, it's terrible. It really is. And there's perpetual cycles of it. Like you don't understand. You don't think there's going to be anger and aggression within these people that they're going to want to seek vengeance. You're creating potential future issues of terrorism. You know, if you're thinking about it, if that's what you want to consider Hamas is a terrorist organization, by killing people's families and their children and wives, that's not making anything better. You know, the best analogy I've ever heard was it's like having an active school shooter in a school and bombing the whole school. You know, and it's a terrible, terrible approach, especially when we know we have insight and intelligence that Hamas isn't even in Gaza. The main leaders are in other countries out there running the operations. So if we have the intel in doing that, what are we doing? We're instilling fear. We're basically trying to just cleanse and remove everybody from that land. Just say it what it is. Just be honest with yourselves and say that you guys are evil people, an evil regime, and that's what you're doing. And it's not anti-Semitic. I love that. I love that term because that just shows you how uneducated some people are. Because initially when I called for a ceasefire, everybody's like, oh, you're anti-Semitic. I said, how am I anti-Semitic? Do you even know what a Semite is? A Semite is a person who speaks one of three languages: Aramaic, Arabic, and Hebrew. And so by default, majority of people within the confines of Palestine speak Arabic, which means they are Semitic people. So how am I anti-Semitic? By defending Semitic people.
Very good question. Very good question. And I don't think most people know the difference.
No.
Because of AIPAC. But the next issue I want to talk about that really is, it's a crisis that nobody wants to talk about. And I don't understand, and it's become more and more of a problem. The American homelessness rate has skyrocketed. Skyrocketed. You have mortgage rate. First of all, whatever happened to single family homes, now we're just building apartments that no one can afford, but mortgages that are super high. The mortgage interest rate, I believe, I think it's down to 6 something, but it's still too high. You have rents in my city where I usually could rent an apartment for maybe $600-700 a month are now going for $1,000 for a studio, $1,500 for one bedroom. Plus you have to pay utilities. Plus, you have to pay, deposit, and most of them want a security deposit, application fees, et cetera, et cetera. Talk about what your administration, well, one, if your administration recognizes that homelessness is a problem, and second, what would you propose doing?
Great question. So, as somebody who's a lesser known candidate, I know a lot of folks try to avoid all the questions. Me, I knew that I had a very small team and I had to be able to disseminate my information as best possible. I have all my plans and everything written out, so I can email you that question specifically so you can get more in depth of it. But it is a huge epidemic, especially the problem that I have with majority of our homeless population is that they're veterans. How disgusting is that? These people fought for the freedoms that I had. They are more American than me because I've never stepped a day on a battlefield or in any kind of military training camp. And for them to serve this country, to create such an amazing space for opportunity for me, and to let them go on the streets like that, find ways to take away their benefits and give them a crappy VA system, absolutely not. That's intolerable. And we have plans to fix that too. The biggest thing too that we need to address with homelessness, and that's within our own communities, is from my experience, what I saw, which disgusts me the most, is the biggest threat to unhoused people are average housed people. We sit there, we look down upon these people. They don't want to be homeless. They don't want to live in that kind of situation to begin with. They go in and out of shelters. The shelters kick them out. And when they're out in public, we treat them like we're a word I cannot say on your platform. And that's disheartening to me because that's what leads them down. They feel alone. They feel lesser of a person. And so what are they going to do? They're going to find ways to cope. And they go down avenues of mental health crises and for drug abuse. We're creating that perpetual cycle. So one of the things that I've, was blessed to do is I've traveled this beautiful country. I've seen that we have a lot of great federal lands. And so the shelter system clearly is not working. We're wasting all of that money. We keep feeding a broken system with a terrible foundation. What we need to do is make sure that we're giving these individuals, one, a space to call their own, and two, a space to grow it as an individual and to correct and help their mental health. So one of the things that my plan proposes is to create THCs, which are the tiny house communities, but offset them away so they can have their own, almost like a retreat in a sense, where they could be with other people who have been through their same situation. And every person who gets admitted or comes into those and decides to come into those communities gets a chance to sit there and get triaged, to figure out what you need, what mental health services you need, what drug recovery programs you need, and any kind of other assistance, whether it be financial assistance and job placement. And let's work on that. And that from there, you go through your regimen and then you can eventually work your way out of it. But at least you deserve a chance. New York City specifically, granted, that's a state issue, but we have so many abandoned buildings that could be used instead of being wasted. We could renovate those and bring them up into more affordable housing for our people. Like nobody should have to live and go hungry. And that's one thing that everybody wants to perceive as America being the greatest country in the world. But you can be the greatest country in the world and then still admit that we have a poverty issue here. We can stop that wage, the wage gap, and start bringing people together and raise up abilities for people to make more money to do it. Because we have people who are paying rents for the same amount that what a mortgage would cost. Now the interest rate was raised up because of the 2020 when everybody was relocating out of nonsense, increasing the real estate values. So they did raise the interest rate to slow down the process of people buying properties so we can kind of balance it out. Eventually it's going to regulate out, but you're right. Home ownership has become so far attached for people. And then you have people who they're refusing to sell their homes because they got lucky with such a low rate that they don't want to give it up. We're really impacting that housing market there. There is a give and take with every decision the government makes, but mental health and homelessness is something we have to, dedicate to and really, really provide the resources for.
Thank you. I will make sure to look for that in my email because it just concerns me that not the media is not talking about it. Nobody. I haven't heard. I've heard some candidates talk about it, and it's one of my pet peeves, like you said, that we have literally buildings that developers have built, and they know that the building is overpriced. They're not building them to rent. They're just getting tax credits for them sitting there. At least in my city, that's kind of how it works. But the next issue I want to talk about is one that I don't have complete understanding about it. And I keep hearing this as a concern. I think it is, but I'm not 100%. And that's the border crisis. I'm not personally sure there's a border
I don't know
crisis,
if
and
it's
I'll tell you why I say that. I believe that the United States has complicitly created situations in other countries like Venezuela, Guatemala, um, I was going to say Bolivia, that's not a country, Brazil, and those countries to make them so poor. Oh, I think Frank is going off. Oh, we lost connection.
I'm I'm struggling a little bit. Am I back yet?
Okay. Yes, you're back.
All right.
I was saying why I don't believe that we have a border crisis because our country has interfered
No.
in other countries' democratic elections. We've made conditions in those countries so bad that they have no place. It's like we created the condition. Now we're mad that they're coming here. Now my solution is just let them all come. California, New
Well,
Mexico, Arizona, Texas belong to Mexico anyway. It was theirs, but that's my solution. Probably never going to happen, but what would you do to address this perceived, or do you even believe that there's a border crisis?
so I don't believe there is a border crisis as extreme as what the media is portraying. I did work 2 years at the Mexican border, so I've seen a lot of the inefficiencies and how exactly the government operates and how they manipulate a lot of the numbers and the statistics. But I do also don't believe that everybody should just be coming in. I should believe that there is a pathway to it. So actually, my immigration plan focuses on what the media doesn't tell you. And from what I had from my own experience, which was the media tells you that just a bunch of Mexicans are crossing over all the time, and it's just Mexicans, Mexicans, Mexicans. When in reality, the Mexicans have the hardest pathway to get here. In fact, any Mexican that was caught at Border Patrol at our processing site would literally get cuffed up, processed, and just at the end of the day, walked right back into Mexico and have a nice day, try again later. That was it. But the numbers that I was seeing was that high 90% of them were coming in from Guatemala, and the remaining were from Central America, South America, and other parts of the country. But high 90% from below the Mexican border. So by that logic, the most dangerous journey where they're going to get raped, attacked, exploited, and the cartels are basically running our system. We're getting out hustled by the cartels at the end of the day. So while we're spending money, they're making money. And so what I have a problem with is I'm not trying to get hustled by the cartels. So by that logic and my understanding, since most of that immigration is coming through Mexico, that means that our immigration problem is Mexico's immigration problem. And so therefore, it doesn't make any sense for us to allocate all of those resources on a 2,000-mile border.
Okay, I think Frank is not, he's frozen again. Doggone it, he was on his way to a good answer too. Um,
Am I back yet? I don't know. I don't know
yes,
what part.
you were getting back to the oh, that's
So
it. Yeah, continue with your answer. I'm like, I forgot where you left off at, but go ahead.
basically run it down. We have 2,000-mile border up here, 500-mile border on the south of Mexico and Guatemala. So our resources will now be way less effective. We could also split the cost with Mexico on the bottom. The next thing would be is now we can triage and bring them in and file their asylum cases right there from the border of Guatemala, which is where most of them are coming from. And then if they pass everything, I have a proposition that says, hey, just like we do with students and student loans, you're going to pay for your own immigration process because it is costly, but we are going to give you the opportunity to escape the hardship, both economic and safety hardships that you're facing from your country, and you'll be able to pay into that system. At which point, you'll be creating jobs. You're paying for those immigration attorneys and those judges and the Border Patrol agents. And you're also keeping a good record of how great you are paying your finances on time. And I'm sorry, but if we've given you that pathway and you decide not to pay or still try to deviate from it, then you pay for your own deportation. That's what it's going to be. But at least you provide that avenue for people to come. I'm not against immigration. Like, let's be real. There's not a single thing that you've done in any single day that did not pass through the hands of immigrants. That's just a guaranteed fact. They're doing the jobs that Americans do not want to do. And trust me, they don't want to do it either. Majority of people coming here are licensed professionals. Well, not majority, but a lot of them are licensed professionals that gave up their degrees and qualifications to work jobs that they're super overqualified for because they can't use them. And we're at a disadvantage because those are skills that we could absolutely use. I've met people who are undocumented, who are doctors, physicians, psychiatrists, lawyers, architects, engineers, and they're sitting there doing nonsense in restaurants and hotels. And it's like, why are we doing that to ourselves? We can be benefiting and growing as a nation and including it. Plus, our immigration process, as I've mentioned, is a voter suppression form, because there's absolutely no reason why somebody who's been here 10, 20, 30 years, paying more taxes than some of our previous presidents, shouldn't be able to vote and have a pathway to citizenship. That's disgusting. They've already been here. They've built up their economies. They've made a presence here. We're not going to send them back. And the worst one is DACA, because DACA is just congestion of our pipeline. Because these are people, the kids who were grown up here, have no recollection of any other country from where they came. They've educated themselves. They've worked here. They're paying their taxes. And we threaten them every so many years that, hey, you know what? This might be the end. You might have to go back. How disgusting is that? What kind of nation have we become?
And they're basically American citizens. They don't know anything else but this country.
Correct. And that's the thing. It's like, I don't remember, like me, my childhood is bits and pieces of my own childhood. I was born here. Imagine them. Like, come on. We have to be more logical and more reasonable. The problem is that our numbers come every year. Our numbers come from those federal agencies, and every single federal agency is a business. And what is the goal of every business is to bring in more money and grow. So there's zero incentive for them to be like, we fixed the border. Now we can all go home. You can fire all of us now.
And this is where, I got to go to the Joe Biden criticism. So he first had said, I'm not going to build the wall. I mean, he thought the wall was a dumb idea. Okay, I could agree with you on that, because walls aren't going to keep. I mean, why are you wasting your construction on a wall that either you can get over, around, or under? You're just wasting money. But then he continued. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Isn't he not continuing the building of that wall?
Correct. He's retracted or redacted a lot of what his immigration policy was now to cater to popular means. And by popular means, I mean what the media is portraying. And so now he feels like he's obligated to go and say all that stuff. The wall does not work. I've watched, in fact, the $25 million GoFundMe Trump wall that they made, I jumped it. I got a picture of me jumping it. In fact, it's this great funny story of how I met one of the agents there who caught me and was basically like, dude, I got the key. All you had to do is ask. Like, he's like, nobody goes that way. He was the coolest dude out there. Pretty sure I was going to jail that day, but obviously, like I said, he was cool. It's easy. It's not something that is a valid approach, and it ignores the fact that the highest percentage of people who come to this country illegally come here legally. They overstay their visas. So we're focusing so much on the southern border, not even worried about Canada, but on the southern border, ignoring the fact that that's only a small percentage of everybody else who's violating the system.
Well, you know why that is, though. The problem is that those immigrants that they don't want, the immigrants they do want, are European or Indian. But I guarantee I know that this country treats Haitian immigrants like poop scrap.
I got pictures and videos for you.
It as a Black American, I'm not any other race. I can't identify. I mean, I can't identify, but I see through the lens of being a Black American, and I look at when I saw those pictures of those men beating Haitians for coming in. the rage. I didn't know I could feel that much rage.
Yeah,
And
it was.
for me, we're gonna investigate. You're gonna investigate yourself. Oh, okay, that leads to where? Nowhere.
It was devastating. So I was actually there in El Paso, Texas, when we received the Haitians coming into our site. And I promise you, the treatment was significantly different. Not much, not like, brown people were much better, but the Haitians definitely got, like, they had them sleeping outside in the desert. I actually almost had an argument with well, it was a little bit of an argument with one of the Border Patrol agents, because when I was helping them, they were sleeping outside and we were handing out mattresses for them. And so, believe it or not, I commend the Haitian people. I mean, granted, I know that they share an island with Dominican Republic, but they did such an incredible job of learning Spanish to help adapt and help them make the process a lot quicker. So I was able to communicate a lot with them because obviously I don't speak Creole. And so we were communicating, and then when we were giving out the mattresses, I still didn't know that they were sleeping outside in the desert, because they were at our facility. So one lady had asked me if I can give her the cardboard. And I was confused. I was like, what do you need the cardboard for? And it was because she wanted to put it on the rocks that were on the floor so that she wouldn't
The
feel them on
rocks
her mattress.
on their
And I was
mattress.
like, you're
Yeah.
sleeping outside? That was wild. So I said, okay, you know what? Once we're done giving out the mattresses, I'll go down and I'll give you the cardboard. So we're reaching the point where now we're almost done. And another lady asked me for cardboard, and I remembered the other one. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I go to the Border Patrol agent and said, hey, we're almost done with the mattresses. Can I start handing out cardboard to people? And he looked at me dead in my eye, goes, I'm not giving them you know what. And I was like, excuse me? And it got kind of hectic. My friends came over and they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, dude, this guy is saying he shouldn't be treating people like this. And thank God another Border Patrol agent came in, white guy, go figure. Because a lot of the Border Patrol agents there are also Latinos, which also hurts my soul that you're going to sit there and treat other people that look like you and sound like you the same way. Like, come on. But he jumped up and he was able to diffuse a lot of that situation, but it was terrible. And I took pictures and videos of that treatment. And that's what kind of upset me, because I sent, even though I was planning on running against Gregory Meeks, my opponent, who has a great and strong Haitian support system, I emailed him and sent him those pictures and videos. And I said, this is unacceptable. You have to do something, speak out, write letters, change what's going on here, because this cannot continue. And he ignored every effort.
Gee, I'm so shocked. Not a Democratic congressperson ignores a.
Mm-hmm.
Last issue, and I went way over time. I'm so sorry to keep you long, but this is real. I'm really enjoying this. Last issue that I want to talk about is the overall state of the economy. Now, while I get that the president can't do anything about grocery prices, and I get the president doesn't have really any control over the gas prices. Those are dictated by private industries. How would you, one, make the American people understand that you understand where they're coming to? And would you be open to offering something like a universal base income to help Americans along the way?
So I am a proponent of universal basic income. I think that is a great step forward. It's a great way to counter poverty. It's a great way to counter the job losses that are inevitably going to come from AI and technological advances. And while the president does not have, you're right, the ability to leverage gas prices and groceries prices because of private entities, we can also run the country better. We're not applying certain regulations that would reduce our number of exports compared to imports, because that's what a country makes their money on. We make more money when we export more than we're paying to bring in. And so we need to sit there and focus on creating jobs here to bring up that revenue, to make sure people have livable wages, and to sit there and export it, which a big portion of that is our climate approach, our climate control. Because if we are the number one producers of oil in this country or in this world, then we should be able to counter that by removing our dependency on it. If we remove our dependency on oil, we can still allow them to operate on private lands, get their own contracts that way, and become the world's number one exporter of oil, just like all of these other developed nations are doing and making buku dollars off of it. If they're doing it, we see it out there. That's one way we can do it. We also need to expand our exports. Right now, we have the biggest infrastructure of medicinal marijuana. We are the best growers in the world right now. And we are so ahead as far as progressive terms where we could, in theory, expand that agriculture advancement, create more jobs that way, and become the biggest exporters of medicinal marijuana in other countries that are way behind legalizing everything.
Mac has a question. He said, would you, as president, commit to starting a presidential commission to develop a strategic plan for the future and endangered flora and fauna of Cuba when it eventually allows free elections to decide the government representation?
Well, it's a unique question because obviously Cuba is their own separate entity, and we have a ridiculous embargo against Cuba. I still, to this day, I don't understand why we do it. We have a hatred towards communist nations, but yet we continue to do all business with all these declared communist nations except for Cuba, which has such incredible medical advancements in treatment and technologies, and we just let it go to waste. I'm for diplomatic relationships with Cuba. I think we can benefit from them. I think we could talk, away from our differences, and I think we could push them. From what I've seen after Fidel Castro had passed away, I know Raul Castro has since then, quote unquote, stepped down. But I think a lot of his policies were slowly integrating the perception that we should eventually be focusing on the people and their businesses within Cuba. Obviously, it's a lot slower, I think, than he thought, and maybe that's not within our near future, but we do need to have some kind of intervention with them too. As far as the endangered flora, I will be honest, I'm not too versed on that, but I will look into it. But that still seems like it is a Cuba decision to make.
Final question. A issue that I highly care about is a living wage.
Yep.
I don't believe that people who work in server roles like waiters, waitresses, help staff should be making $2.25 an hour, and then depending on tips. I don't believe that America, that hasn't raised the minimum wage in 10 years at least.
More.
It's more than 10, but I can't remember the exact number. It's been $7.25 for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
One, I don't think you have to convince Americans that the minimum wage needs to be raised. I don't think that's where you would get the pushback from. I think, and I'll get to my question is, if you raise them, I'm going to assume you're for raising the minimum wage. One of the arguments against raising the minimum wage is, well, how can the small business, the mom and pop shops, afford to pay what I would call a living wage? So my question is that, and what would you want to raise? What specific amount would you want to raise that to?
Well, I think it's disheartening that we're sitting there. The numbers that we're arguing for is $15 an hour. And as we know, if you do the math, even that is not enough. Like, there's nowhere that you can live on your own for $15 an hour. And I agree that, there will be impact on certain smaller businesses, but also in different areas of business. We can't just sit there and look at it as a whole. That's why it's imperative to have that universal basic income. So we have that base income there. So that way mom and pops could compete. The next thing is we raise the wages, but then it's okay because we raise the wages in mom and pops, but then we supplement things that they're already paying for by making them not pay for it. Like, for example, right now businesses have to provide medical insurance to their employees. So if we develop that Medicare for all, or whatever you want to call it, or healthcare for more, as some presidential courts, if we have that base there where everybody has that guaranteed health insurance and health coverage, the small businesses no longer have to consider that an expense in which they could potentially pay their workers more. So when you're taking away that responsibility from the business owners, You're making a better work environment too. Plus, I'm sure there's plenty of people who are working in jobs that they are just dissatisfied for because that is that they have offered to them. If they're able to get their benefits and everything from other places, they might be willing to work more locally for those mom and pops that are already struggling to maintain their businesses, which means that those businesses can now grow and expand and create more of that working class. It's all about quality of living and quality of life. And what's happening now is that a lot of that labor force is not here. And if we're not raising those wages, like even with Social Security payments are not going up. If anything, they're depleting because we're not being proactive enough to handle it. So now you have the elderly folks not being able to survive, and which the minimum wage doesn't impact them at all because they're not working at that point. But we're sitting there allowing Americans to struggle. And it's disgusting. Right now we have Americans that are living in the highest level of debt that they've ever been in their entire life. We have usury laws within the states, but we don't on the federal level. Credit cards can charge up to 30% interest. So we have people living basically on their debt and having the inability to pay it back within their lifetime, just damaging their credit, which now even further removes them access to home ownership and getting those mortgages even at a 6% rate.
And I think that's what's frustrating me so much because you said it. If you had an because someday I hope to start, my own practice when I get my degree and then go to school and then be too old for the job. But that's a whole different personal story that I don't feel like getting into. But if I didn't have to pay for a business for health care, that's like the most. If we had Medicare for all, that would lower the cost for large corporations, which I don't see why they wouldn't want to do that because that you could offer more money to your employers, and maybe that's why they don't want to do it. But I don't think you gave me a number though.
Oh, so that's the thing is the number with universal healthcare basic income. It definitely needs to be way above $15 an hour should be the minimum threshold. But like I said, the number should vary based on within the actual industry itself. I think that we need to figure out what a fair market value is because it is unfair. There are definitely different profit margins in different industries that are going to spec. Like big oil obviously makes a lot of money. They can afford to pay people a lot more. But like, ink ribbons for like typewriters, if you're selling that at your mom and pop store, you may not be able to afford $25 an hour or whatever we raise it up to. But that's where the good of the offset of the universal basic income is because that's already providing them a base. So even at 15, that might still be a reasonable way to do it depending on your cost of living where you are and the type of environment in which you work.
And I know so many people with gig jobs. Like they work a 9 to 5 and then they're having to pick up Uber Eats or Instacart or something else. And that's still not enough for them to get by.
Exactly.
And that's what I think. I'm like, how could you be against universal basic income? It doesn't make sense to me.
Because the logic, so the only way that people sit there and they look at universal basic income and it doesn't make sense to them because the question is who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for it? And so recently I was held at or hosted at a debate by Free and Equal that created a Democratic debate for lesser known candidates, even though all the candidates were invited. So then it became a lesser known because we're the only ones that accepted. But I spoke about that, and I spoke about how right now with the advancements of AI, companies are using it for two reasons. One is to expand, make their jobs easier, expand their business and create more jobs. But majority of people are using it to make their job easier and reduce more jobs. So as the advancements of AI come in, our workforce is decreasing and declining. And so when you sit there and think about that for a second, 47 to 50% of our government revenue comes from individual taxpayer dollars. So if we have less people paying taxes because there's less jobs, then we're going to go broke. We're not increasing that thing. So where it comes from payment comes from the business that are prospering from AI and from decisions that reduce the labor force. So they're the ones that are only going to be paying those taxes because they're the ones causing that discrepancy in our unemployment rates. And so that's where it comes into play. Plus, if you actually cut off a lot of these tax loopholes, like I said, 47 to 50% of our tax revenue comes from our revenue comes from taxes. If we close off those tax loopholes to the really, really wealthy, then we get a whole economic boost, which then can cover that economic universal base.
Finally, because I went way over my time. I usually like to end at 8:30. I'm like, no, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's not going to come back for our debate. He's not coming back
I'll
at
be there,
all.
trust me.
Tell the wait a minute, one more comment, and I'll let Marlon have the last word. He says you're making some good points.
Thank you.
Tell everyone how they can connect to you, connect to your campaign or your social media handles.
Yeah, so my social media is terrible. So if anybody wants to volunteer and help out, I will gladly take any kind of insight. Our website is lozada2024.com. That is our official website. We're waiting for our other domain to switch over. The current moment hasn't done there yet. And just reach out. If you hit that contact button, it goes directly to our team. They're usually very, very responsive. We, unfortunately, have a very small team, so we value as many volunteers as possible. So if anybody wants to volunteer, we have some primary elections coming up. Those states that we're on the ballot for that are remaining are Texas, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Illinois, South Dakota, Louisiana. I feel like I'm forgetting Minnesota. So any of those states, check them out. If you want to help out, we would greatly appreciate it. Obviously, money and manpower are the biggest, strongest things for a campaign. So if you want to donate, you can donate right from the site. Everything's appreciated. Any little bit of help counts. We are really trying to make our points out there. We're trying to show folks that we have those options. And plus, as a candidate, for you to reach out, it only allows me the ability to grow. And even if you don't align fully with some of my beliefs, I want to hear from you, because your vote for me is just as important as a vote against me. And I can't sit there and leave people out who are going to believe that if they elect somebody, they're not going to be heard and they're not going to be looked at. I want to make sure that we are very inclusive with everyone and seeing how we can meet in the middle and see how I can help you help me.
Thank you a million times. Like I said, I had been trying to get you on here. I'm so pleased that I have gotten you on here. Remember, everybody, to share this video. Share it to every social media platform. Um, Share it to your friends, your frenemies, your neighbors, your cousins, everyone. Make sure you share this video. Make sure if you see this video after today that you comment on it. I would love for our candidates to receive actual comments. That would be so appreciative. As always, remember to subscribe to this channel, support this channel, and you can always visit me at my website, which is right there on the screen, TRACYMedia where you'll find all of my social media handles. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening. Goodbye. And see you next week.
Yeah.